Welcome to Media Spectrum, where stories still matter. I'm your host, Daniel, and today we're going to be reviewing an old childhood favorite of mine, a Goofy movie. Fun fact, this is actually the very first movie I saw in a movie theater. Not the first movie I saw, I definitely saw some at home before this, but my first cinema experience, at least I've been told by my mom, was a Goofy movie. This came out in 1995, which would have put me at 3 years old, so I was a perfect age for it. So obviously this movie has a bit of a nostalgia factor for me personally. But that said, having just rewatched this, I think this is a really solid movie. It's simple, it's an uncomplicated father and son bonding story, but at a little less than 90 minutes, it's super efficient and definitely a millennial classic. One of the things that's interesting to me about this movie and its legacy is this is one of the few examples I know of cultural appropriation where this was made by a largely white cast, white creative team, but over the years has been kind of co-opted by Black Millennials as a Black representation film. Obviously, I am not the most ideal person to be speaking on this particular topic, but I'll have a link in my description to a really good video essay on the subject by READUS, who delves into all the ways this movie is kind of Black-coded. I'll just say, I can see it. I can definitely see some aspects and not just the Powerline, who Powerline is basically like a combination of Michael Jackson and Prince. But beyond him, even there are some elements of this movie where I can see why Black Millennials would be a little especially drawn to it.
Trouble? What kind of trouble?
Dressed like a gang member.
Gang member?
Your son caused the entire student body to break into a riotous frenzy!
That said, you don't have to be Black to enjoy this movie. I relate to and enjoy a lot of the father-son stuff here. It's very universal themes. I think just if you're a Black American who grew up around the same time as I did, there are maybe some elements that'll speak a little bit more to you. So the movie starts really strong with this little dream sequence in which Max, the son of Goofy, has a borderline little sensual dream about his crush Roxanne, only for it to be violently interrupted when he starts transforming into Goofy. But this is a really well done sequence that helps set up the main themes of this movie, of Max trying to win the heart of his crush Roxanne, while at the same time being absolutely terrified that he might be turning into his dad. And for a G-rated movie, this is some surprisingly effective body horror. Again, saw it in the movie theater as a 3-year-old, and yeah, his transformation into Goofy freaked me the hell out as a little guy. You know, rewatching this recently definitely brought back some traumatic feelings during that sequence. And honestly, even if you're an adult, you know, the idea of having a dream in which you transform into your parent, that would freak out most people. It is surprisingly effective for a children's movie. Then from there, Max goes to school, and I have to say I love how 90's coded so much of the stuff going on is around him. The way people dress, some of the phrases being used, the geeky Star Trek kids, all of it.
Stacy! Talk to me, baby!
Cheddar Wizard!
And essentially, Max goes a little too far trying to woo his crush, putting on an impromptu show, cosplaying as Powerline. The uptight principal freaks the hell out, calls up Goofy, panicking about Max getting sent to the electric chair if he doesn't change his ways.
Before he ends up in the electric chair!
And so Goofy, in a panic, decides to take Max on a cross-country fishing trip without any knowledge or understanding that he's really messing up a cool chance Max has with his crush in the process. And from there, most of this is a fairly simple series of vignettes in which Max and Goofy fight, grow further apart, then come back together, bond, and ultimately end up in a much healthier place than they were before. Again, this is a simple movie, but it is very well done, and one of the things I really appreciate here is the fact that they actually take Goofy somewhat seriously as a character. Like, don't get me wrong, he's still Goofy, he's doing all the dumb stuff you would expect, but his fears for his son are very real. They're very relatable. He's clearly dealing with insecurities involving Pete and his status in relation to him. His status as a man, his status as a respected dad, his status financially. In almost every aspect, he seems to be kind of a beta to Pete, and he's feeling it in different exchanges.
You know, maybe Max isn't all the things that you think a son should be, but he loves me.
Hey, my son respects me.
Yeah.
And then he also has fond memories both of his own dad, who we never see, but we hear a couple stories about, and of his much better relationship with a younger Max. And again, these are some very universal things. I think all of us have had parents try to recreate some beloved aspect of their childhood with us, only for it to not quite work out the way they intended. Goofy is just going off his own knowledge. He loved these stops as a kid, so he figures Max will love these stops, not understanding that Max is a different person than he is, and probably a little bit older. Max, I'm not sure they ever say his age exactly, but he seems to be in high school. Maybe it's late middle school, but I'm pretty sure it's high school. So let's put his age at 12 to 15, somewhere in that range. Whereas Goofy's treating him like he's 8. Again, I think this is a very common mistake. A lot of parents kind of love their kids as kids and struggle with how to handle them during their adolescence as they're growing older, especially in this awkward teenage stage where they're really not a kid, but they're not an adult yet either. Goofy's trying his best, but he's Goofy. He's not quite nailing it. And as for Max, they do such a good job of making Max a very believable teenage son of Goofy. Like, of course, Goofy would be an embarrassing dad at times, especially during your teenage years. And I love some of the similarities they're able to highlight between them. Some of it's kind of subtle. For example, very early on, Goofy embarrasses Max with his little Mambo King dance. But then when Max gets positive news from Roxanne about going on a date, he celebrates by going into a mambo.
Everybody mambo! It's not my break yet.
He is his father's son. He cannot avoid it. I especially love, like, the thing that melts Roxanne's heart is his laugh, in which he laughs like Goofy, where Max is horrified by that laugh and runs away in embarrassment from it. The very thing that humiliates him is the thing that draws his crush to him. And again, simple, but so effective, so lifelike, so relatable. I think all of us at some point have seen what we perceive to be our worst traits, perceived by someone else to be our best traits. It's just part of growing up. And ultimately, the biggest problem between Max and Goofy is just a lack of communication. Goofy sees Max as a younger version of himself. In some ways he is, but in some ways he isn't. Whereas Max just sees all the negatives of Goofy as this horrifying, embarrassing loser that he wants to be absolutely nothing like. But the fact is, he gets a lot of his good traits, like his empathy and kindness, from Goofy as well. And especially watching this movie as someone in my 30s now, who's had complicated relationships with both of my parents, I think this is such a universal thing. I think almost all of us are terrified of turning into our parents, and almost all of us do on some level. There are ways I'm very, very different than my parents, but there are ways I'm very similar to them also. And I think we tend to focus on the negative aspects immediately, but there are positive aspects also. Not to get super personal, but if I look at my dad's influence on me, for example, I have a very strong sense of morality and justice and right or wrong that primarily comes from my dad. I also spend way too much time at home playing movies and video games, which is something I picked up from my dad also. Not the most personal example, but there's one trait, and I think if all of us are very honest about our parents, if you had a parent in your life, they probably had influences on you, both positive and negative. And learning to accept that is just part of growing up. And of course, it's no coincidence that things finally get better in this movie when they start actually talking to each other and communicating with each other and are able to get on the same page. Goofy realizes he's being a little too harsh on Max in some ways, and that he needs to let him grow up and live his life. And Max realizes, hey, Goofy's actually not that bad of a dad, all things considered. He could be a lot worse. And there are honestly worse fates than becoming just a little bit more like Goofy sometimes. Also, I haven't even mentioned yet the music. The music in this movie slaps. The Powerline concert is kind of legendary. You just put on Powerline music and anyone in their mid-30s is instantly going to start feeling things. But even outside of that, the little musical sequences along on the road trip, all of them are not only catchy little tunes, but they also give good insights into where the characters are on their journeys or help progress the plot, which is something musicals are supposed to do, but a lot of times they don't. So it's really nice to have not just good music, but have it actually be part of the story. So in conclusion, this is a simple but really nice nice, really well-made movie. If you're a millennial who wants a little childhood nostalgia, if you're looking for something to show your younger kids, there are worse ways to kill 80 minutes for sure. Another element I really appreciate, especially in this time when so many movies insist on being 2.5-hour epics when they don't need to be, there's something to be said for efficient storytelling, and this movie is efficient. So anyway, that's our time today. I'll see you guys next time. If you enjoy the videos, a like and subscribe really helps. I'll see you next week. Until then, stay sane, stay human.